The poll isn't going to be relevant to all in this series. However, I felt it worth addressing the poll and going over it in brief, as the first few videos in this series will relate to them. As I'm sure you're aware, I'm an atheist, and I prefer the propositional use of atheism, and an atheist is one that believes gods do not exist. However, I understand there are various uses of atheism, and if someone identifies as atheist but doesn't use my use, it doesn't really matter as long as I know what they mean. Although, yes, I would prefer it if we were all speaking the same English, but that's another matter entirely. Now, whilst the lack of belief definition might not be the most common in philosophy, literature, in media, and most places around the world, when you are online, when you are in these debate groups or on Twitter, the lack of belief definition of atheism does seem to be the most common one used, at least among those the most loudest in the debate groups. It's also used in certain circles. For example, secular or atheistic activism often use this lack of belief definition, and that is sort of to try and encapsulate all non-theists under one heading rather than separate. Could use non-theists and secular rather than trying to get them under the banner of atheists, but that's neither here nor there. They're doing their thing, and in a lot of cases they are doing some good work, so label doesn't really matter. Regardless of the preference of definition, I addressed atheists, and I used it in a way that was just sort of trying to find out what they think of gods. I did say in there that not only what do you think about gods, but the theistic aspects of theistic religions, which is what I was trying to get them to infer from there, was like claims of miracles and some form of supernatural thing that could be linked back to a deity. You know, is there any plausibility to that in some way, shape, or form, even if they thought that maybe there wasn't a god? Now, the poll had some problems, and one of those problems is that some of the social media outlets only allowed 4 or 5 poll choices. So I decided to limit it to 4 atheist choices, and if there was a 5th option available, it was for atheists to click, see results, because they were interested in what the end result of the poll is. The next was probably the length of the choices. There's only so much text you can fit into those little lines. You're trying to capture a position that captures positions sort of in a bubble, a general positions, like all of these ones could fit under this, all of these ones could fit under this, and so on and so forth. And I can understand why that could be problematic. Some of the comments that you ended up getting were actually, well, this is the way I see it, and you're like, that's exactly what that is. It's just worded slightly differently. People are almost stuck in a particular way they see their position, that they don't realize that if you say it this way, it's the same as this. They're just said 2 different ways. Now, what I did actually do on the poll was I gave a bit more information underneath the poll describing the choices. But the poll reads as follows. As an atheist, which statement best represents your position about gods and theistic aspects of theistic religions, not the other parts that might hold some truth? For clarity, when I say unsure below, it means you don't think they are true, but you don't think they are false, also known as suspending judgment. I've limited this to 4 atheist choices due to collecting data from other social media outlets that impose this limitation. I hope to do a more detailed poll in the future based around the collective results. The options were all are false, mostly false, rest unsure, Christianity false, rest unsure, unsure about all, theist, see results. So, now another issue that you have when you're doing polls and posts and things like that around social media is if you put too much detail in the original post, people just ignore it. You need to keep it as concise as possible. And I felt like even that was a little bit long. There was a chance that people were just going to ignore it. But I did put in explanations. What I had expected people to infer from what I'd stated was this. If it was all are false, the option implies that you believe no gods exist, and all theistic claims are false as well. Mostly false, rest unsure. So this option implies the voter believes that most gods do not exist, but there is at least one deity that they are unsure about. You know, they haven't concluded they definitely don't exist yet. When I say definitely don't, I'm not even saying like 100% they definitely don't exist. I'm talking about they're not even leaning that way to they probably don't exist. Christianity false, the rest unsure. Now, the implication here is that they've concluded that Christianity is false and the rest of them they haven't really looked into. They are unsure about these. They haven't concluded one way or the other if any of these other gods exist. Now, with this, perhaps it should have been Abrahamic faiths false. There wasn't enough space when I put in the questions. So when it came to it, it was just like, yeah, you know what? Christianity is the one that is probably the biggest religion discussed among English-speaking people on the internet and in these debate groups, and most of the atheists I speak to who have come out of religion from America, this is, tend to have come from a Christian background and that they are now atheists because of this. So they might believe Christianity is definitely false, but they might not have looked into any other form of theism or religion at all. So I figured that was a pretty safe choice to put in there. But yes, you could expand that and vote that if it was also Islam, for example, and you could have that same sort of choice there, because the idea was like best represents, you know, what describes your position closest. You know, it's not like this is definitely what I think, but this is the closest to how you'd see it. And the idea was hopefully exploring some of these in the future. And then unsure about all, well, this would imply that the voter has not concluded that any gods do or don't exist. This is usually represented by the suspense of judgment position, but it could be for other reasons like agnosticism or atheism. So the request was to vote on what best represents your position. In other words, the closest approximation to what you think about gods.